Welcome to the presentation of the First Pages Prize for 2020. From our shortlist of 11, we actually have 4 winners this year. You're about to hear from their opening paragraphs.
Isabel chose a bright blue Nokia, the color of every minibus in Lusaka, so as not to confuse it with her work phone. Buying it was like scratching a mosquito bite. An impulse she couldn't stop, even if she knew better. In the car, she sent her husband's mistress the first text. "Missing you, loveness. It's me."
My parents named me Athlone after the place in Ireland where they had the most fun. It was where I was conceived. My dad always added, "At least we think. It makes a nicer name than Wexford." When I was 6, they took me with them on a trip back to Ireland, and what I remember from before the bad thing happened is the rain on the electric fields, the rain on the lavender stone wall, painting it black, the raindrops chugging down the windows, speeding up and slowing down for no reason.
Yoni just turned 1, and Rena's thighs and stomach were still lumpy. Nothing had reverted to curves, not like after Shosh was born. She was examining the pucker of a thigh when David proposed adultery, although he refused to use the word. "A wife swap?" Rena said. It was the deviant bit of budding summer when observant Jews, unencumbered by holidays, have long stretches of time in which to practice something other than devotion to God. He didn't like the word swap either. Her thigh rebuked him with a quiver. She did not look up. "Temporary," he said. "A trade. A spouse trade." He emphasized the word spouse as if parody made the thing honorable. "It's a thing that people do. It helps marriages last," David said. Shavuot was weeks earlier, and they were fine then. At its core, Shavuot wasn't a religious holiday, and she was discovering, at her core, she wasn't a religious person. Until the gloomy Tisha B'Av in late July, Rena and David were bound by nothing more than weekly Shabbos observance and, nearly as Jewy, regular Dodgers games. The weeks hadn't been great, but they'd been fine. The same.
Sardines. We reeked of them. Me and all the other women at the Yardrunker fish factory. Their stinking oil greased up our hair and our skins, and their flesh got trapped under our fingernails. I could taste them at the back of my throat. We sat jam-packed beside the conveyor belts or on long tables, trussed up in our matching white uniforms and headscarves, preparing the sardines, sorting them, and stuffing them into cans. There was no escape, and complaining made no difference. I would be trapped there until I got married, and even then, it wasn't a guaranteed thing. Some women never escaped.
The rest of the shortlist will also receive $300 cash awards exceptionally this year.
So I'm delighted to be here today with Sebastian Faulks, judge for this year's First Pages Prize. Sebastian is the author of 20 books, including Birdsong, Human Traces, and his latest novel, Paris Echo. How do you approach your first pages?
The thing to remember, for me anyway, is that the first page rarely ends up being the first page. I'm on the finishing straight of a book at the moment, and the first page I started maybe a year or so ago, and a version of it appears now on page 205. That's how little of it remains. So I think the great thing to do about a first page is not to be frightened of it, not to think, once I've started here, I'm going to have to follow this, and this is my first page forever. It isn't. It's a way of feeling your way in. It's like putting your toe in the water, getting into the pool, and you're going to rewrite it 50, 60, 70 times and probably throw it away. So don't be scared of it. Have a go.
Thank you so much. I think writers listening to this will feel really reassured that they're not alone with that first pages sort of nervousness. Coming to our second question, we've just heard from the writers of the winning entries this year. In first place, we had The Telling Time. In joint second place, Disappear Here and From the Verb to Know. And in fourth place, Bush Babies. Could you tell us a bit about why you chose these entries?
Yes, I chose them because each of them had something that immediately appealed to me, whether it was a setting which was unfamiliar to me, but that the author seemed to be willing to share their knowledge of. They all had characters in them who were a little bit surprising or a little bit two-dimensional. For instance, The Verb to Know, it was this closed Jewish religious community and a real ambivalence between husband and wife as to what they were doing. There was a sense that these characters could unfold and develop. And the same in Bush Babies, actually, the opposition between the husband, the wife, and the teacher. You felt you were on one side, then on the other side, and then you weren't quite sure where you are. And that's a really good thing with characters, the feeling that they can go on. And with the winning story, Telling Time, again, something about the setting was new to me. Sardine canning factory, never been there. But I felt that the author knew the characters, and I felt that there was enough in them, enough potential in the characters to go on to make a novel. And there was, again, as the letter was delivered at the end, there was this nice cliffhanger. Of course, for all I know, none of these authors really had a full book in their mind, but they certainly seem to have. And that's actually the key to the beginning of a novel, to convince the reader that you have something to tell them and to engage them. And that's what I liked about all four of these. And the Irish story too, Disappear Here, probably the best written of the four in a way, the most from a literary point of view. I wanted to go on with all of them.
And coming to our final question, what advice would you have for writers entering the First Pages Prize next year?
The standard of all the entries I had was very high. Make sure that from the very beginning you engage the reader with something that he or she perhaps doesn't know. One of the best bits of advice I ever had was from a poet, an English poet called Craig Raine, who was asked why his poems are so good. And he said, well, I always try to give a piece of information. Tell them a fact. Actually, scrub that. I think it was James Fenton, but one of those Oxford poets anyway. And that's something worth remembering, trying to hook people in. The book I've just finishing at the moment, the first sentence is quite long. It packs a lot of information and it leaves you quite uncertain. But what it's saying to the reader is, this is going to be a powerfully plot-driven novel. As a matter of fact, it isn't. But I felt that was a way of drawing the reader in, the expectation that they were in for a great story. And to some extent, you don't have to be entirely honest with the reader. There are two things you're doing in writing. One is the thing itself, the words, and the other is your relationship with the reader, which happens underneath the sentences. And finally, my advice would be to weigh every single word in every single sentence and see if it's the right one. The paragraph I was writing yesterday, the and has changed to but and back again 7 times. And finally, I've settled on or. And I'm afraid that's the level of detail you need.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to do.
Thanks. And thanks to those of you who've been watching. Now we're going to hear from the winner of the Sandra Carpenter Prize for Creative Nonfiction.
The Sandra Carpenter Prize for Creative Nonfiction was created to recognize an emerging American writer like my cousin. We are proud to announce that the first winner of the Sandra Carpenter Creative Nonfiction Prize is Allison Hong Merrill. Allison was born and raised in Taiwan and came to the U.S. at the age of 22 as a university student. The first pages of her memoir, Grafted Mandarin, transport the reader back to 1996 when Allison was 23 years old. One of our judges commented, "It's a compelling narrative that cloaks its complexity in short, direct sentences and unexpected imagery. Grafted Mandarin sets us on a literary path filled with emotion, anxiety, and promise." Allison, we believe in your work. Keep telling your story. Your voice matters.
Beaumont, Texas, November 1996. I learned that I became a starter wife from a light switch. Not a light bulb, like I had a big idea. A light switch. A light switch in my apartment that I flipped on and off, but the living room remained dark, and that darkness caused a pricking, tingling sensation in my hands and feet. When I left the apartment 2 hours earlier, the lights worked, the heater ran, and Cameron, my husband of 16 months, was doing homework on our bed. Lately, we kept fighting about investing in the boat his father planned to purchase. I said no, and we've been giving each other the cold shoulder for days. Tired of our never-ending arguments, now I want a reconciliation. This particular day, around dinner time, I went to seek marriage advice from my classmate, a fellow Taiwanese student. Before leaving, I stood before Cameron and said goodbye. If he hurt me, he acted otherwise. So I wrote, "I love you, Cam," on a post-it note and left it on the inside of the front door. It wasn't there now. Now, I had to feel my way to the bedroom, felt the bed, felt one pillow, felt a chill. I didn't need to keep feeling anymore. I didn't need to avoid bumping into the desk or the chairs or Cameron's bike. They weren't in the dark with me. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for watching, and congratulations again to all of our winners. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, the De Groot Foundation, for generously supporting Cash Awards, and also our partner, the American Library in Paris. So once again, take a look at the website to see details to enter in 2021, and join our mailing list to keep in touch and hear all the latest news.